I want you to take a second and just completely shift your perspective. Like, imagine how you look right now from the point of view of a microbe.
Oh, yeah, that's a wild way to think about it.
Right. Because to a roaming bacterium or, a fungal spore, your body isn't just a person walking around. You are an extraordinarily attractive environment. You are essentially this walking, talking, biological utopia.
Yeah, a utopia with perfect climate control.
Exactly. You're at 98.6 degrees of pure structural stability. You're wonderfully wet, and you're just absolutely stuffed with endless nutrients. I mean, from a microscopic perspective, you are the ultimate all-you-can-eat buffet.
It is a slightly terrifying thought when you put it
Yeah.
that way, but it's completely accurate. Right at this very moment, in your immediate surroundings, like on your phone screen, on the chair you're sitting in, literally floating in the air you're breathing, there are trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that would be more than happy to just move in and set up a permanent colony inside you.
Which naturally makes you wonder, well, why haven't they already? And the only reason you are not currently being consumed by the microscopic world is that you have a defense system of staggering sophistication. It is running constantly, completely silently, just right there in the background.
Yeah, and most of us never even think about it until it temporarily struggles and we wake up with a sore throat.
Right. But today, we are going to look under the hood. Okay, let's unpack this because we're going to take a slow, detailed journey through this system to see exactly how your body manages to tell friend from foe and how it fights off this endless invisible siege.
And to really grasp how miraculous this is, we kind of have to look at the sheer scale of the mathematical problem this system has to solve. Literally every single second of your life.
It's a massive numbers game.
It really is. To defend you, your immune system has to distinguish between things that belong to you, which is roughly, 30 trillion human cells,
Yeah.
and things that do not belong to you. And it has to do that for pathogens it has never encountered before.
Wait, pathogens it's never seen?
Yeah. It even has to recognize and neutralize viruses that literally did not exist when you were born.
That's mind-blowing. The stakes are about as high as they get because the system has to perform this flawless identification while never, ever turning its weapons on those 30 trillion cells that make up you.
Exactly. Because if it fails in one direction, an invading infection just takes over.
And if it fails in the other direction, your own defenses turn inward and you literally start dismantling your own organs.
Right. And that high wire act is managed by splitting the defense into two entirely distinct layers. But before we dive into the complex cellular warfare that we typically associate with the immune system, the white blood cells and the antibodies, we really need to appreciate the very first layer of defense.
The physical stuff.
Yeah, something we call innate immunity. Think of innate as meaning it's basically built in from the factory. It is incredibly fast, it's general purpose, and it is fully online from the exact moment you take your first breath.
And what I find so brilliant about this innate system is that it doesn't actually care exactly who or what it's fighting. Like, it isn't scanning for a specific serial number on a virus, is it?
No, not at all. It operates entirely on broad pattern recognition. It's basically looking for fundamental structural patterns that are common to microbes, but completely absent from human biology.
So it's looking for general red flags.
Exactly. So it might detect a certain type of sugar that only exists in the cell walls of bacteria, or it might spot a particular, bizarre arrangement of viral genetic material. It targets the structural load-bearing walls of a microbe things that are so fundamental to the pathogen's survival that the microbe can't just mutate and discard them.
I mean, this innate immunity starts with things I honestly never gave credit to as being part of the immune system at all. We always jump straight to thinking about blood cells, but the everyday physical barriers are doing a staggering amount of heavy lifting.
Oh, absolutely.
Like your skin, for instance. It isn't just wrapping paper for your organs. It is a formidable, almost impenetrable fortress wall.
It really is the ultimate physical barrier. And where you don't have skin, like the delicate linings of your airways, your lungs, and your digestive tract, you have other highly specialized defenses. Mucus, for instance.
Ugh, mucus. We all hate it.
We do. We tend to think of it as just a gross bodily nuisance when we have a cold, but mucus is actually a highly engineered sticky trap. It's designed to capture invading particles before they can ever make contact with vulnerable cells.
And the hidden micromechanics of the respiratory tract are completely wild. You have these tiny microscopic hairs called cilia lining your airways, and they basically act like millions of microscopic brooms, right?
Yeah, they're constantly beating in unison.
Sweeping the trapped debris and mucus up and out of your lungs so you can just cough it out or swallow it.
And if you swallow it, the pathogen runs right into the chemical barriers. The acid in your human stomach is so aggressively corrosive that it outright destroys the vast majority of microbes you might accidentally swallow with your food or your drink.
It's basically an acid bath.
Yes, and even your tears and your saliva are heavily armed. They contain these specific enzymes that act like microscopic chemical scissors, literally slicing open the cell walls of bacteria that try to enter through your eyes or mouth.
It paints such a clear picture of like a medieval castle. You've got the moat, the thick stone walls, the boiling oil ready to pour down. Most potential invaders are stopped right there at the outer perimeter.
Right, the castle guards never even have to draw their swords.
No cellular immune response is even necessary because the wall just did its job.
But walls are never perfect, you know. You get a paper cut on your finger, you scrape your knee, or maybe a particularly stealthy virus manages to slip past the mucus in your lungs. When a threat actually gets past the skin or survives the stomach acid, the body needs an immediate, incredibly brutal response to contain that breach before the microbes can start multiplying.
Which brings us to the guards inside the castle, the frontline soldiers of the innate immune system. These are specialized white blood cells that are constantly patrolling your tissues, and when they find an invader, they are absolutely ruthless.
They really don't mess around.
No. For example, the macrophages. The name translates from Greek to big eaters, which might just be the most perfectly descriptive name in all of biology.
It is entirely accurate. Macrophages are essentially biological garbage trucks, or if you prefer a more active visual, they are microscopic Pac-Men.
Just waka 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 eating everything.
Literally. When a macrophage encounters a pathogen, it physically reaches out, engulfs the bacteria, swallows it whole, and traps it inside a little bubble within its own body. Then it floods that bubble with powerful acids and enzymes, just digesting the invader alive.
Wow. But macrophages aren't the only ones to trolling. You've also got neutrophils, which make up the bulk of your white blood cells. And the way they operate almost sounds like something out of a horror movie.
They are very intense.
Right. Wait, the text says they cast out webs of their own DNA to trap bacteria, like a microscopic, self-destructing Spider-Man. That is an intensely aggressive tactic.
Yeah, neutrophils are basically the kamikaze pilots of your immune system. They fight so fiercely that they routinely destroy themselves in the process. When they sense an overwhelming bacterial presence, they will literally rupture their own cellular membranes.
Oh my God.
They unravel their genetic material into this sticky, highly toxic net that traps and neutralizes the bacteria around them. It is a total sacrificial move designed to protect the surrounding healthy tissue at all costs.
That is just wild. And alongside the big eaters and the kamikaze fighters, you have natural killer cells, which have a slightly different mandate. Instead of hunting for outside invaders, they specialize in inspecting your own human cells.
Yeah, exactly. They're looking for cells that have gone rogue.
Like a cell that has been hijacked and infected by a virus, or maybe a cell where the DNA has mutated and it's on the verge of turning cancerous. And when a natural killer cell finds one, it lashes on and forces that rogue human cell to self-destruct.
Now, as you can imagine, all of this intense cellular warfare creates a significant amount of local collateral damage. Yeah. And that damage leads to a biological process we are all intimately familiar with: inflammation.
Yeah, we usually talk about inflammation like it's a glitch or just a huge nuisance. Like you twist your ankle or get a deep scratch, the area gets red, swollen, hot, and painful, and our immediate instinct is just to reach for a bottle of anti-inflammatory pills to shut it down.
What's fascinating here is that inflammation is actually a highly orchestrated fire alarm. It means your innate immune system is working perfectly.
Wait, really? It's supposed to happen?
Oh, absolutely. When your tissue is damaged or infected, the local cells release these chemical signaling molecules. They act like emergency flares in the night sky. They signal nearby blood vessels to widen, and more importantly, to actually become structurally leaky.
Okay, hold on. Leaky blood vessels sound like a terrible idea. Why would we ever want our blood vessels to leak?
Because you need to rush reinforcements directly into the battlefield. Those macrophages and neutrophils are traveling in the bloodstream. If the vessels don't become leaky, the immune cells literally can't squeeze out of the blood and enter the infected tissue where the fight is actually happening. They need that fluid highway to flood the zone.
Oh, Oh, that makes perfect sense. And it completely explains all those terrible symptoms, like
Yep.
the redness and the heat you feel around a cut. That's just the massive increase in blood flow rushing to the area.
Yes. And the swelling is the physical fluid, and the millions of immune cells flooding into the tissue. Unfortunately, as that tissue swells up like a water balloon, it presses physically on the local nerve endings, which is exactly why inflammation hurts so much.
And a fever is just this exact same concept scaled up to the entire body, isn't it? I always assumed a fever was a symptom of a virus making me hot.
That's a very common misconception, actually.
But the body is intentionally turning up the internal thermostat. Pathogens are heavily adapted to replicate at normal body temperature. So by raising the heat, the body makes it incredibly difficult for the virus to multiply, while simultaneously making our own immune cells operate faster. I mean, the fever is a weapon we deploy against the
A
invader.
highly effective weapon, yeah. This entire innate system, the physical barriers, the fierce inflammation, the big eaters, it is incredibly quick. It is responding within minutes of a breach. But as we established, it's blunt. It relies on recognizing generic, broad patterns, and biology is just a constant evolutionary arms race.
Right, the microbes fight back.
They do. Some pathogens have evolved to be incredibly stealthy, hiding those patterns, coating themselves in protective armor, or just slipping right past the guards.
Which forces the body to adapt. So what happens when a virus is stealthy enough to evade the macrophages? That brings us to the second distinct layer of the immune system. We are moving from the blunt frontline guards to the highly specialized intelligence agency.
This is adaptive immunity. If the innate layer is fast, general, and present from birth, the adaptive layer is slow, highly specific, and most importantly, it learns.
It learns. That's so cool.
It is. This entire system is built around specialized white blood cells called lymphocytes, specifically B cells and T cells.
To really appreciate how mind-blowing this adaptive system is, we have to talk about the mathematical puzzle it has to solve. To attack a specific, stealthy pathogen without harming the surrounding tissue, your immune cells need a receptor on their surface that is shaped perfectly to fit that specific pathogen's molecules. It has to match like a highly complex key fitting perfectly into a unique lock.
That is the core challenge, because the human genome, all the DNA instructions required to build a human being, is vast,
Oh,
but it is finite.
okay.
There was absolutely not enough room in your genetic code to carry a specific pre-programmed gene for every single possible pathogen in the universe.
Let alone the new ones.
Exactly. Microbes mutate rapidly. There are strains of flu or novel viruses circulating today that did not even exist 10 years ago. You cannot genetically inherit a specific key for a lock that hasn't even been invented yet.
So how on earth does the body build a key for a lock it has never even seen?
It uses the power of random generation. As your B cells and T cells develop, they do something utterly unique in biology. They take the small segments of their own genes that encode these receptors, and they start cutting them apart, shuffling them around, and rejoining them in entirely novel combinations.
They are essentially shuffling a genetic deck of cards to produce a brand new hand every single time.
A deck of cards with an almost incomprehensible number of combinations, yes. This random shuffling produces an enormous variety of receptor shapes. Current estimates suggest it generates well over 100 million distinct possibilities. Every single individual lymphocyte ends up with one unique, randomly generated receptor shape on its surface.
Hold on, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. So the body isn't actively analyzing an incoming threat and intelligently designing a weapon to match it. It is just blindly manufacturing 100 million random keys in advance, putting them into circulation, and just hoping that when a new unknown lock eventually shows up, at least one of those random keys will happen to fit.
That is the fundamental brilliance of it. It manufactures a vast random library of keys, and it simply waits.
But wait, if it's completely random, if you are generating 100 million randomized biological weapons, aren't we inevitably, just by sheer statistical probability, going to generate a key that perfectly matches the proteins on our own heart cells or our liver? How does this random system not instantly kill us?
It absolutely does generate those self-targeting weapons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that reality necessitates one of the most ruthless quality control processes in the human body. Because these random receptors are so profoundly dangerous, developing lymphocytes have to go through a brutal screening process. For T cells, this takes place in a small organ in your upper chest called the thymus.
So the thymus is basically an extreme biological gauntlet.
It is the ultimate washout program. As these newly minted T cells mature in the thymus, they are actively tested against a massive array of the body's own molecules. They are paraded past pieces of heart tissue, liver proteins, lung cells. Essentially, they are shown pieces of you.
Okay.
If a T cell's randomly generated receptor binds strongly to one of your own molecules, it means that cell has built a weapon that targets self. And when that happens, the T cell is immediately instructed to trigger its own cellular death.
That is staggering. The system deliberately destroys the vast majority of the cells it works so hard to make, just to ensure that the tiny fraction that survive will never attack your own tissue.
It's an intense filtering process, but totally necessary.
Right. But let's say a cell passes the test. It has a random, unique key that doesn't attack self. It goes out into the bloodstream. How does the body actually match that 1 in a million key to an invading pathogen during a raging infection?
It relies on a critical communication step called antigen presentation. Remember those innate frontline guards? The macrophages?
The Pac-Man.
Right. When they engulf and digest an invader, they don't just destroy it and move on. They actually take tiny molecular fragments of the destroyed pathogen, bring them to the surface of their own cell membrane, and display them.
It's like they're holding up a piece of the enemy's uniform and asking the millions of passing lymphocytes, has anybody seen this? Does anyone have a weapon for this?
That is exactly what happens. These presenting cells travel away from the infection site and head to your lymph nodes, where vast numbers of your lymphocytes are just circulating and waiting. The macrophage shows this fragment around to cell after cell until, by sheer statistical probability, the one specific lymphocyte with the randomly generated receptor that perfectly fits that fragment bumps into it.
And when that perfect match finally happens, everything changes. The lymphocyte activates. It essentially realizes, I'm the one. My random key fits this invader. Here's where it gets really interesting, because that single solitary cell begins to multiply rapidly.
It does.
It clones itself over and over again, producing a massive army of identical clones, and every single soldier in that army is armed with the exact receptor needed to target that specific threat.
The response is incredibly coordinated, and it depends on which type of cell found the match. If a B cell gets activated, it transforms into a microscopic antibody factory. Antibodies are these tiny Y-shaped proteins that are pumped out by the millions. They flood into your bloodstream and bodily fluids, just hunting for the pathogen, and when they find it, they bind directly to the invader's surface.
And antibodies are brilliant because they work in a few different ways, right? Like they can physically gum up the machinery of a virus so it can't dock with your cells. They can clump bacteria together so they're stuck in a massive pile. And they act like giant neon eat me tags, signaling those frontline macrophages to come and clean up the mess.
Meanwhile, the T cells split into different specialized roles. Killer T cells are deployed to actively hunt down your own human cells that have already been infected by the pathogen. They destroy the infected cells directly to stop the virus from using them as replication factories.
Brutal, but effective.
Very. But arguably the most important players are the helper T cells. They act as the generals of the entire operation. They release chemical signals that coordinate the immune response, directing both the B cells and the killer T cells on exactly where to go and how aggressively to fight.
That makes total sense of something that's always been a bit abstract to me.
Right.
It explains why HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, is such a uniquely devastating pathogen. HIV specifically targets and infects those helper T cells.
It is a terrifyingly effective evolutionary strategy. When HIV destroys the helper T cells, it's not just taking out one type of foot soldier. It is systematically dismantling the communication and coordination layer of the immune system.
The generals are gone.
Exactly. Without the generals there to direct the battle, the entire downstream immune response becomes disorganized and eventually collapses. That leaves the body completely vulnerable to everyday infections that a healthy immune system would usually just swat away without a second thought.
Now, obviously, this entire adaptive process, finding the one random key, verifying the match, building a massive clone army, and pumping out millions of antibodies, it takes time. Usually a week or more during your very first encounter with a brand new pathogen.
It's not instantaneous.
Right, which explains why we feel so utterly miserable during that first week of a new infection. Your innate system is desperately holding the line, using fever and painful inflammation to slow the virus down, while your adaptive system takes a week to build the perfect custom weapon.
The delay is the price we pay for precision. But the ultimate payoff of the adaptive system makes it entirely worth it. And that payoff is memory.
The memory cells. This is where the magic happens.
Once the infection is finally cleared and the battle is won, most of that massive clone army undergoes programmed cell death. Their job is done, and keeping them around would just take too much energy. But a tiny fraction of them persist. They transition to specialized memory cells, and they will quietly patrol your blood and tissues for decades, sometimes for the rest of your life.
So if that exact same pathogen ever tries to invade your body again, even like 20 or 30 years later, the response doesn't take a week.
No, it takes days, sometimes mere hours. The customized cells are already there, pre-tuned, battle-tested, and ready to multiply instantly.
Yeah.
The response is so breathtakingly fast and overwhelming that the virus is neutralized before it can replicate. You usually don't experience a single symptom. You go about your day completely unaware that you were just infected and cured.
And this touches our everyday lives constantly. This memory mechanism is exactly why you generally only get a disease like chickenpox once. Your body built the custom memory cells during childhood, and they've been standing guard ever since. More importantly, this is the exact mechanism the vaccines leverage.
A vaccine is just an elegant way of skipping the dangerous infection part of the learning curve. It simply presents your immune system with a harmless version of the pathogen, often just a tiny dead fragment or a structural protein.
But the immune system doesn't know it's harmless.
Right. It still goes through the entire arduous process of finding the right random key, building the clone army, and crucially, creating those long-lasting memory cells. You get all the lifelong immunity without ever having to suffer through the actual disease.
It is a brilliantly engineered system, but because it relies on 100 million random biological weapons, massive clone armies, and highly aggressive killer cells, the margins for error are incredibly slim. When a system this powerful misfires, the results are drastic. And because it's so complex, there is a lot of bad information out there about how to maintain it. So what does this all mean for us? Let's do a little myth-busting about what it actually means to support this system and what happens when it loses its way.
The most pervasive myth we encounter is the idea of boosting your immune system. It's slapped across the front of every other supplement bottle in the pharmacy. But biologically speaking, the concept of boosting your immune system is meaningless. And honestly, if you actually could hit a button to permanently boost it, you really wouldn't want to.
Right, because the immune system is not a volume dial that you want cranked up to a 10 at all times. An overactive immune system isn't what we call health. An overactive immune system is the literal definition of disease.
Exactly. What genuinely supports your immune system is remarkably unglamorous. It requires adequate, consistent sleep. It needs reasonable nutrition, regular exercise, and the management of chronic stress hormones. It needs you to avoid smoking, and it relies on vaccines to build its library safely. Now, if you have a documented vitamin deficiency, fixing that is important. But if you're a generally healthy, well-nourished individual taking a handful of expensive megadose supplements to boost your immunity does very little besides give you expensive urine.
Because when the immune system is too active, we see real, tangible problems. Take allergies. Millions of us deal with allergies to spring pollen or peanut butter or cat dander.
In those scenarios, the immune system is making a categorization error. It is misidentifying something entirely harmless, like a protein in a peanut, as a deadly invading pathogen.
The pollen isn't actively destroying your cells. The terrible symptoms you experience, the streaming eyes, the extreme swelling, the constricted airways, that is entirely self-inflicted damage. It is your own innate immune system causing massive systemic inflammation to fight a war against an enemy that poses no actual threat.
Yeah, and in extreme cases, like full-blown anaphylaxis from a peanut allergy, that cascading overreaction can be life-threatening in a matter of minutes.
Then you have the tragedy of autoimmune diseases. We talked earlier about that brutal screening process in the thymus, where T cells that accidentally recognize your own tissue are forced to self-destruct. Autoimmune disease occurs when that quality control screening fails, and self-targeting cells manage to escape into the general circulation.
Right.
The examples are stark. Type 1 diabetes happens when the immune system actively targets and destroys the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. Multiple sclerosis is a sustained immune attack on the protective insulating sheath wrapped around your nerves. Rheumatoid arthritis is the immune system aggressively dismantling your own joint linings.
It is crucial to understand that patients with these conditions do not have weak or compromised immune systems. They have incredibly powerful, highly functional immune systems that are tragically locked onto the wrong target.
It makes you realize that for all of its aggressive killing power and sophisticated weaponry, the most vital and counterintuitive feature of the immune system is its restraint. its ability to tolerate things.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, your moment-to-moment survival depends entirely on that tolerance. Take your digestive tract. Your gut contains trillions of beneficial bacteria that you rely on to digest your food and synthesize essential vitamins. If your immune system treated them the way it treats a salmonella infection, you would be violently, chronically ill. It must tolerate them.
And the most profound example of tolerance has to be pregnancy. For 9 months, a mother's body carries a growing fetus that is genetically half foreign. It contains the father's completely distinct DNA. By all normal rules of immune logic, the mother's body should immediately identify the fetus as a foreign biological invader and attack it. But it doesn't.
It doesn't, because the immune system possesses a specialized division of cells called regulatory T cells. Their entire mandate is to patrol the body, assess the situation, and actively suppress immune responses that shouldn't be happening. They enforce the peace. The system's restraint, its ability to hold its fire and maintain harmony, is just as highly engineered and just as critical to your survival as its aggression.
So, to recap the epic journey we've been on, you are walking around right now protected by a multi-layered masterpiece of biology. You have unseen physical barriers like sweeping waves of cilia and corrosive stomach acid. When the walls are breached, you have fast-acting, aggressive patrols of big eaters and kamikaze neutrophils that deploy inflammation as a weapon,
And backing them up, you have that slow-learning, highly specific intelligence agency.
generating millions of random keys, putting them through a brutal screening gauntlet, and building a massive clone army the exact moment it finds a match. It is a system that flawlessly tolerates what we need and relentlessly fights what we don't.
And there's one final, almost poetic thought that emerges from all of this complex biology. Because your adaptive immunity is based on creating and preserving specific memory cells for every unique pathogen you have ever defeated, your personal immune system serves as an internal biological diary. Floating in your bloodstream right now is a permanent, microscopic record of every environment you've ever lived in, every person you've ever been close enough to catch a cold from, and every invisible threat you've ever conquered. Your immune memory is, quite literally, the unique, microscopic autobiography of your body's survival in the world.
A biological diary of survival. That is just a brilliant way to look at it. Next time you get over a minor head cold, maybe take just a second to appreciate the trillions of cells that mobilized, communicated, and went to war to make your recovery happen. This incredible system is running right now, silently keeping you alive, and the only reason you aren't thinking about it is because it's doing its job perfectly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.